I want to go over today the new rent control guidelines that are enacted as of January 1st, 2020. So, California has passed Assembly Bill 1482. It's a statewide rent control measure. And what it basically tells you is how much rent you can increase a property as a landlord, what type of properties you can now consider rent control, and it also covers when you can evict a tenant under just cause situations. And you now also have to give notice to all the tenants, whether they're under rent control or not under rent control. You got to now give a form before August of 2020 notifying them of their rights. So let's go over this so that you're not caught short and get under violation from some attorney, right? So, okay, so what properties are under rent control and which ones are not? Okay, so if you own a single family home, a condo, or a townhome, those are not under rent control unless those properties are owned by a corporation, an LLC, or a REIT, which is a real estate investment trust. If it's held under title under one of those three, it would then convert to rent control. All right. If you own a duplex, 3-unit, 4-unit, or above, anywhere in the state of California, those properties are now all under rent control, unless the duplex is owner occupied and you're renting out the second unit. Then you're exempt from being under rent control. Okay, so those are the properties. Okay. Now, how much can you increase the rent each year? The guideline is it's 5% per year plus the regional CPI index. So if your property is in Los Angeles County, let's say, pick a city in LA County, and the CPI index for that region is 3.3 as of 2020. So you go 3.3 plus the 5%. The maximum increase could be 8.3% for that year. If the property where it's located does not have a regional CPI index, then it converts to the state's CPI index plus 5%. Okay? So that's how you calculate how much you could go up a year. The second part of this is you now have to give proper notice. If you want to increase the rent, you got to now give tenants a 90-day notice before rents can be increased. And that is also part of other nuances that you got to follow when you're increasing rents. You also have to have tenants that come to you with a Section 8 voucher. You can't discriminate against them anymore. You can't advertise saying not accepting Section 8. You now have to accept Section 8. That is under Senate Bill 329. That was just passed January 1st. The other part of this rent control measure is that if you have two conflicting rules, the state has a guideline that you got to follow, and then let's say LA City or Santa Monica has a guideline that's more constricting, then the rule that's more constricting is the one that governs. So with that example of rent increase, LA City has capped the rent increase to the CPI index, and that's it. They've eliminated the 5% increase per year. So LA City will govern over the state's mandate. So the most you could increase a rental unit that falls under rent control in LA City, for example, can only be 3.3% for that year of 2020. Okay, it's a little confusing, but that's the crux of how to increase rents. Okay, the other thing that's kind of interesting too is that you also have to, if you want a tenant to move, you have to give relocation assistance to a tenant if the property is under rent control. So relocation is calculated at 1 month's rent. Either you let the tenant not pay the last month's rent, or you give them a check for 1 month's rent and have them pay the last month's rent. Either way, but that's the new guideline. And if a tenant is in the property for less than 1 year, that tenant doesn't qualify for rent control under the 2020 guidelines, all right? Until after he's lived in the property for more than 1 year, then those rights kick in. And another interesting thing is the state was trying to encourage builders to continue building more property. So what they did is they passed a bill that says if an apartment building is built within the last 15 years, that building is not under rent control. Okay, so that's always going to be rolling 1 year ahead. So as of 2005 and earlier, those properties are not under rent control. Okay, that's what they're hoping that will increase more development and alleviate this housing problem that we're experiencing right now. What else is there? There is also, let's say you want to remove a tenant because back when you wanted to get your property vacated, you would just give the tenant a 60-day notice without a reason. You just say, I want you to move, period. Now, you got to have what's called just cause. You got to have a reason that's valid. And there's 4 valid reasons that are recognized under this new measure. So the first one is that the landlord wants a family member to move back into the property. That would give just cause eviction on the tenant with proper notice of 90 days. The second one would be that the landlord just doesn't want to rent the property anymore. Maybe there's too much deferred maintenance, or maybe he wants to leave it vacant because he has family members coming in throughout the year and he wants them to stay at his property, his empty house, right? The third one is the city has condemned the property. Maybe it's the property was illegally built, or there's too many health and safety issues. So the city says you can no longer rent the property. That would be under just cause eviction. You got to vacate the tenant, right? And then the final way in which you can ask a tenant to leave is if you are doing substantial remodeling and it's going to be more than 30 days and it's not practical that the tenant stay there while the work's being done. That would be the 4 ways in which just cause eviction are considered acceptable. All right. And then finally, the last thing I wanted to cover with you is this form. Let me see if I could show it to you. Okay, this is a sample form, but it's a rent cap and just cause addendum. Whether your tenant is in rent control or not in rent control, you got to give this form. And the form outlines what the tenant's rights are or what they are not if they don't fall under rent control. It's kind of weird, but you got to do it. You got to educate your tenants as a landlord as to what the new laws are. If you fail to do this and they don't sign the paper, probably there'll be some attorney that figured out a way how to make money on failure to disclose. So make sure you do it and you do it correctly. Keep the file, keep this page in your folder with your other documents on your lease and your applications. Make sure it's been done by August of 2020 because just don't get caught short. All right. If you have other questions that I didn't cover that are more specific, reach out. I could probably answer them for you. And if not, I'll research it because it would be something I'd like to make sure I understand as an on-site management company. In addition, if you think that maybe this is getting more than what you wanted to do, what you signed up for, and you're looking for someone to manage your property, give me a call. Let's interview each other. Maybe there's a fit between you and I. And lastly, if you think this information is useful and you know someone that could use this information, feel free to pass it on. I hope this was helpful and useful to you. Feel free to reach out if you have anything else. Thanks.